And it's a story about a man who lives in a town called Krakow, and his name is Itzhak. And Itzhak is relatively poor. He has enough to get by. He and his wife have a small home. The best thing in their home is the stove that they use both for warmth and for cooking. Itzhak one night has a dream. And in this dream, he travels all the way from Krakow to Prague. And in Prague, he goes to the palace. And beneath the palace is one of the bridges over the river. And he goes to that bridge, and he goes underneath that bridge to the bank of the river, and he digs underneath the bridge, and he discovers a treasure. And Itzhak wakes up in the morning, and Itzhak thinks, that was a weird dream. Itzhak doesn't put a lot of stock in dreams, so he goes about his day. He goes and he does his work, and he comes home and he eats his dinner, and he goes to bed. And the next night he has the very same dream, that he travels all the way from Krakow to Prague, that he goes to the bridge beneath the palace, that he digs up a treasure. He wakes up in the morning and he tells his wife, it's strange, I had this dream twice in a row. And she said, Itzhak, you don't put much stock in dreams. And he said, it's true, I don't. And so he puts it out of his mind and he goes to work and he does his things. And that night, for the third night in a row, you're getting a pattern here, he has the same dream, travel all the way to Prague, dig up the treasure. So he wakes up in the morning and he says to his wife, I really think I gotta go. This is a sign from God. I gotta go. So she says, all right, well, if you gotta go, you gotta go. So he saddles up their horse and their cart, and he gets in the cart, and and it's a long journey. I don't know if you've ever gone from Krakow to Prague by horse and cart, but it's a long journey. And sometimes he stays in a little inn if he can afford it, and sometimes he sleeps in the back of the cart. But slowly, he makes his way to Prague. And when he gets to Prague, he goes towards the palace, and then he goes to the bridge that's beneath the palace, and it's just like in his dream. And he's so excited that he's going to dig up the treasure, and he gets to the bottom of the bridge, and it's surrounded by guards because it's the palace, and there's guards walking around the bridge and under the bridge and around the palace. And he can't just go digging in the dirt and, in front of all these guards. So he sits there sort of all day, sort of watching the changing of the guards and their shifts. He's like trying to figure out if there's some sort of break where he can get in and dig up his treasure that he knows is his. And, night falls. He thinks maybe the night shift will be less vigilant, but they're not. They're still there marching around, and he's just sitting watching them. Now, these are pretty good guards. And they notice that this guy has been watching them all day. So they go and they tell their chief, and they say, there's this weird guy, and he's sitting and he's watching us all day, and he's creeping us out. So the chief goes to look into it, and the chief goes up to him and he says, hey, Jew, what are you doing here? And Itzhak knows that he's in trouble, that this isn't going to look good for him. He knows he can be arrested just for being there. And he decides that maybe his only option is to tell the truth. And so he tells the guard this story about, I've had this dream each night for 3 nights where I, had to travel all the way here, and I went and I dug up under the bridge and there's treasure. And the guard looks at him a long while, and then he says, you can't put any stock in dreams. If I put stock in dreams, then I would have to travel all the way to some town called Krakow. And I would have to find the house of some guy, some Jew named Itzhak. And I would have to look underneath his stove to find a treasure. But I'm not going to do that because I don't put any stock in dreams, and you shouldn't either. Go home. So Itzhak goes home. He takes the long journey, makes it all the way home, gets home, kisses his wife, digs underneath his stove, and discovers there a modest but helpful amount of treasure. And it is said that the Itzhak Synagogue, which still stands in Krakow to this day, that was miraculously spared from destruction during the Holocaust, was started by a donation from the treasure that Itzhak found underneath that stove. So it's a story about traveling and about coming home. And it's a story about the way that travel can help us to appreciate the treasures we have at home. And it's a story about trying to muster some gratitude for the things we have and the life we have, and that sometimes going out into the world can give us a new perspective. And it's not unlike in that way this week's Torah portion, which is Eikev. The Israelites are standing at the shores of the sea. They're encamped, not at the shores of the sea, shores of the river. It's been a while since the sea. Now they're at the river, waiting to cross over into the promised land, hearing Moses' final speeches, preparing for what their life is going to be like on the other side in the promised land. They've been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. It's been over 400 years since their ancestors were last in the promised land, and now they're going to have the opportunity to cross back. And God and Moses are very concerned that when the Israelites cross over into the promised land, they're going to forget the source of all the blessings that they have. They're going to start to think, the great things that happen to me are because I am great, instead of the great things that happen to me are because I am very lucky and because God takes care of me. And so much of Moses' final speech to the Israelites is describing for them how they should try and avoid that. And in this week's Torah portion, Moses is saying to the Israelites, these are all the blessings that will happen if you follow God's commandments when you get over into the promised land. And these are all the curses that will happen if you don't follow God's commandment when you get over in the promised land. And this is challenging for me because I don't really believe in a God who sits and doles out blessings and curses to people who do or don't do what God says. But I think maybe this story sheds some important light on that idea from the Torah portion, which is it's not that Moses is saying, do these things and you will get blessings, but that noticing your blessings is part of what God wants you to do. Noticing all the good things that happen to you is part of what God wants you to do. That one of my favorite things about gratitude is that it's impossible to have the word thank without the word you. The minute you notice that you have a blessing, you notice that the source of your blessing comes from outside yourselves. You wouldn't say, thank me. That doesn't make any sense. And so God is encouraging the Israelites who have been on this big, long journey and who are finally coming home, a home of their people, a home that they've never known, to notice all the blessings that are there, to notice the blessings they already have, to notice the blessings that are in the earth. This is the Torah portion that says that it's going to be a land flowing with milk and honey, to notice the blessings that they're going to have to dig up, to turn those blessings out into the world, and like Itzhak, to use those blessings to build community, like Itzhak built a synagogue. And so my hope for you on this Shabbat, or we are on the very cusp of August, whether you have been recently on a trip, or whether you are going soon on a trip, or whether you've done some staycationing, whatever it is, my hope for you is that wherever you travel, that you find the blessings, especially the blessings of home. That you appreciate those blessings, that you acknowledge that those blessings come from a source outside of yourself, and that you share those blessings with the people you love and use them to help to build a life and a community that is stronger than what it was before. And in that way, we will all be blessed. Shabbat Shalom.